Hang on. There we go. Make sure my Wi-Fi is connected. There we go. Perfect. Welcome back to another edition of the Just for Today podcast. And this week I am joined by the wonderful Katie, who is here to talk about what's been happening in her life in the last few years as part of the Women Who Thrive series. So, Katie, I'm delighted. Thank you for your time today. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Steph. My name's Kate Saunders, or Katie Saunders, and I've come to have a little chat with Steph today because over the last 5 years, I have been diagnosed with first a primary breast cancer in 2017. And then in 2021, I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer. And basically what that means is it's as they call it, an incurable cancer that I now will spend the rest of my life living on a medication to make the best of life as it is today.
Wow. I have loads of questions. I have loads of questions because usually the association with cancer personally for me is terminal and short-lived. That's my experience of that. So can I ask you quite a personal question here? And with something as a secondary breast cancer that you're living with now, how long was the medication going to be? Is it every day? And what is the prognosis with something like that?
So I'll start with the medication. So for me, currently, I'm on a tablet every morning and every night. And once a month, I have to go to the hospital, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 injections plus blood tests. So that's every month. And that is injections to look after my bones, and then also hormone. I don't think they class it as a blocker, but it is something that works to stop the estrogen that's actually feeding my cancer, because that's where that's actually it's an estrogen fed cancer.
Okay.
Then, so from a prognosis point of view, they never actually, well, I've certainly never been given a prognosis for how long that looks like. And I'm a firm believer that actually I don't really need that. But if you was to speak to the secondary breast cancer community, quite often it's around a 5-year onwards diagnosis, potentially. Okay. But obviously some people can be less than that because it depends how and where that cancer is. Mine was actually predominantly in my liver. So it moved from my breast to my liver, extensively in my liver. And then they had suggested that it was in my pelvis, on my rib, and on my spine. So I had elements of scans, CT scans, MRI scans, and started off on the first part. Well, I'll say the first part, is actually the second part because I'm secondary breast cancer. I started on chemotherapy straight away, intravenously every week for 12 weeks. So that's what it started as in November. Oh, the 1st of December it started, 2021. And basically my tumor markers were very high. But they quickly, it was called, the medication or the chemotherapy I was on was called paclitaxel, and that quickly reduced those tumor markers and the tumors that were in my body down to, let me think about it in a percentage form, because that would probably be an easier way to look at it, probably down from, let's say it was at 100%. Obviously, my body wasn't 100% covered in cancer, but let's say it was at 100. It was brought down to about 20, 30%.
So that is significant.
So significant. And then the medication I'm on now has now brought me down to what they call no evidence of disease.
Mm-hmm.
So NED, no evidence of disease yet. So, and that has been, so I've been officially, well, it's unofficially because it's complicated. Because my liver had tumours in it, the tumours, although they have gone, they leave scar tissue. So my oncologist can't actually officially say you've got no evidence of disease, but my blood work and my tumour markers would insinuate there is no evidence of disease. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated, but as far as I'm concerned, because they can't, the only way they would be able to, other than the blood results, other than by taking a biopsy of one of the scar tissues in my liver, they can't say definitely there's no evidence of disease. And there's no need for them to go in and do a biopsy, because as far as I'm concerned, there's no evidence of disease.
Yeah.
It's better to look on the positive than it is to look on the ifs and buts and maybes. Yes. And so that was quickly established. So 12 weeks of chemotherapy, full chemotherapy. And so that finished at the beginning of March. And then I think by sort of November of that year, maybe even sooner, or September time actually, that was when I'd got into no evidence of disease. So the blood work was low and my CT scans, nothing, it all changed. All they could see was this scar tissue on the liver. And I've been like that since September time 22. So a year. So I've been a year of no evidence of disease.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. So
12 weeks of chemotherapy, that has to have been really grueling for you. Would that be a word you would choose?
It was, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I think I really got away quite fortunately, because the first few weeks were quite horrific, but that's because I was not eating properly. And I think that's down to the fact that the cancer had got to my bones. So then that's where obviously then you go off your food. And so I wasn't eating properly. So me and my husband made a very conscious effort, as soon as I was diagnosed, to go on to, I had this obsession with making sure that I got vitamins into my body. So even if I didn't eat very much, I made sure that I had a juice, a pure, mainly vegetable juice every day. And so because I wasn't eating that much, when I started the chemotherapy, I think it was quite a shock to my body to have this chemotherapy going into my body. And my body was really quite clean because there was no real food in it. I was eating, but a bit like a bird.
Right.
But I was also eating quite cleanly because I was eating a lot of juiced vegetables and fruit. So I do think I have a bit of a theory that potentially I was really quite poorly because, one, I wasn't eating properly, and two, my body was really quite clean. And so it really had quite a impact on me. But I think also that had a positive impact because, like I mentioned, my tumour markers were extremely high and they dropped really, really quickly. And I think that's because my body was really quite clean, although I would not recommend people to do that because it was a bit of there was no choice really. I wasn't eating properly and I just had this desire to really at least get something nutritious into my body, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend people do that because I was really sick and I had really bad upset tummy for about 4 days after having my chemotherapy. But then they started me on steroids as well. So soon as I got my appetite, I then started eating better, and then that sickness and upset stomachs, and I stopped the juicing. As soon as I stopped doing that, I then felt a lot better. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I think. I think it really did help me with the impact of the chemo, but I was really, really sick at the start because of that. So I wouldn't recommend it unless someone was supervising, and I didn't really have anyone supervising. I was sort of a little bit going at it alone, if I'm honest, because I was just desperate to do anything. But yeah, so but the next 12 weeks, although I was tired, and you get a lot of sort of numbness in your fingers, fatigue was the biggest issue for me, and I hadn't been feeling well, so I felt like I actually started to improve as the chemotherapy started to go through my system. So the journey, I think, was a bit in reverse of possibly somebody else going through chemotherapy, but I don't really know, because I don't really talk to an awful lot of people that have been through what I've been through. I tend to be quite insular and sort of look after myself. And there's not really anyone to talk to about sort of that path as such, because I do look at nutrition and I have quite a healthy lifestyle, and I don't really feel like there's not a network of people that you can talk to in that field, really, other than I have an integrated oncologist who I work with, which is someone who is alongside the NHS oncologist that I have.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I just do on my own. I pay privately for it. It's a one-to-one consultant. And I take different herbal tablets to look after myself. So I feel like I'm giving myself an element of power back, an element of control.
Yeah, I can understand that. When my son recently went through chemotherapy for, I don't know if you know, but he had testicular cancer. And when my eldest son, and he's very health conscious, what he puts in his body, he's very, very aware of what he wants to eat. And we enlisted some support from a nutritional therapist, Marie, and he was taking things like medicinal mushrooms throughout his chemotherapy. He was coming home and drinking bone broth and all sorts of things to really nurture his recovery. And whilst we can't make a comparison, because we can't say now let's do it without those things, but he is pretty much convinced that he bounced back a lot quicker after the dose of chemo, because of the things that he was putting in his body and how he was supporting his body at that time. Just by eating really good things and meal prepping and those sorts of things. So I think it definitely makes a difference. It has to, doesn't it?
I absolutely 100% believe that as well. It's just a shame that there's not really I've not really found anybody, even on my primary diagnosis and my secondary, when I said to them, because you're desperate when you first find out, you sort of, well, is there anything that I can do to help myself? And they, like, I remember my first diagnosis, they actually said, just don't be silly and give up meat. I mean, I still eat meat, but I just have it in moderation. But I just think what they know about food and how good it is for you, and I can't understand why. I mean, obviously the oncologists, they just don't talk about nutrition at all. And when you ask, they say don't change your diet. So it's bizarre that doesn't come into the equation in any shape or form. I mean, there might be other oncologists that do encourage that, but certainly the people that I've come across, they don't talk about.
No. I think that's, I don't know, if we're talking about NHS here, I think that will be a resources restriction, a needs must. But even for my son, he was privately supported because of his healthcare insurance. And there really wasn't much discussion then around food and what to eat and what to look after yourself and supplements to take and anything like that. We went out and found that support, separately, because it's so important that we nurture from the inside out. And when we're experiencing something like cancer where chemotherapy is being used, it's a really powerful drug. And if we can do anything to help ourselves, it can only be a good thing. But the education's not there. But I think I could probably get on my soapbox about that across the board, and the education around food and nutrition, and there's a whole conversation in that aside. But how did you feel when you got the secondary diagnosis?
It floored me. It just literally took the feet from under me. And I had, I basically, I'd been having some digestive issues and some things all going on with my body. And I'd been and seen consultants and not really got anywhere, told that there wasn't anything, given omeprazole, told that it was indigestion and these sort of things. So to have done everything I possibly could and then to go back and push it again, I was actually private. I wasn't actually some of it was done through the NHS and some of it was done privately. That I actually went about something totally different to see a gynecologist, and that's when he was the person that found it. It was sideswiping, and then having to come home and tell all of my family was devastating. But at the same time, I knew straight away, and I remember coming into the house and telling everybody that this was my journey, and I was the one that it was happening to, and that I was going to do everything that I possibly could to make sure that we came out of this the other side with the best the best prognosis that we could get, and that I would look after myself and I would do everything that I possibly could within all of my power. And that's just simple things like self-care, looking after myself. And I have to say to the kids sometimes, I just can't do that today, guys. I just can't do it. It's not because I can do it. I can absolutely run you here, there and everywhere, but I'm tired and I just don't want to overexert myself. So I really do try and put myself first, which I've never, ever done.
I was going to ask you, have you always been that way?
No, I never have. Everyone comes before me. I got a little dog who's been my savior because she just loves me unconditionally. So when everyone, you know what it's like at home when you have these fiery conversations with one another every now and again, just for not picking up your shoes or your coat. I always know that I've got a furry friend that's prepared to love me no matter what. That's massively helped. And I think having chemotherapy and everyone looking after me for 12 weeks allowed me to go, this is now about me looking after me. And so my life just completely changed. I had to learn to say no. I had to learn to say yes to the things that I actually wanted to do, and maybe say no to the things that I used to say yes to them, even if I didn't want to do them, which is really, really hard to do. And then I also had to learn I've always been a really energetic, on the go kind of person. So I've had to make peace with my sofa. My bottom hasn't sat on this sofa for many years until I got my diagnosis, and now I sit on a sofa.
Is there any noise that ever goes through your head when you're sitting on that sofa?
Not really. I think all of my life I've been a very anxious person, and when I got my primary diagnosis, I knew life had to completely change. So I started from my primary diagnosis, which was in 2017. I started to have acupuncture because I was so anxious, and I couldn't live every day thinking, what if it came back? What if it came back? So I had to get control of the active mind. So I had some acupuncture, which was amazing. I can't tell you how that unlocked a lot of stress and worry. And when I say unlock, I just mean I didn't figure out what was causing the anxiety. I just managed to function better. So I enrolled in the gym, started yoga, and that sort of was my starting journey of personal development. So I started to then realize how powerful meditation was, how the mind is actually a tool that we should actually pick up and put down. And in day-to-day life, we all allow our minds to control us. And I didn't realize that. So when my mind was telling me, what if this happens? What if that happens? I would listen. And I would get myself in a complete state over things that my mind were telling me that were going to happen, that might happen. But they were all stories. And I didn't realize that that was my mind doing it. And so having acupuncture and starting meditation and yoga led me to do my teacher training as a yoga teacher. And that allowed me to realize that actually I'm in control. Me, my soul, me, not my mind. And that was a massive turning point for me. So I don't tend to let my mind run away with me anymore. And quite a lot of people that I hear in the secondary cancer community, scanxiety is quite a big topic of conversation. And I think from my primary diagnosis, going and doing yoga, learning to meditate, learning how the brain works, so learning about neuropathways, allowed me, like I've read lots and lots of different books, and just allowed me to take control. And that is how I've managed my life since my secondary diagnosis.
What about the family around you, your close family? Do you find you're managing them, supporting them? Is there been a conversation that you've had where this is not something we're going to do, we're not going to do this, or we're not? How does that kind of play out?
We don't really talk about it. And that sounds really unhealthy, but my sister is very in tune, knows how the brain works, and is very in control of her own mind, and supports me an awful amount with talking to me and EFT, which has been amazing. My mum's a little bit anxious, so she's like me with her anxiety. Soon as I do get a little bit anxious and I speak to my mum gets upset, and she quite often will come and see me, which is comforting, but I feel bad because I can see that she struggles with that. In my home with my husband and my children, it's life as normal, but that's because life is normal at home. I have spoken to my daughter a few times. She's 18. She gets it. She actually is studying biology at school, so she has studied a bit on cancer, so she does have an awareness. But because I'm relatively well, I think at the moment it's life as normal, and I do love that. I love life as normal, and I don't want it to be not as it was unless it has to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
so
does.
it's difficult because I do worry about it, because I don't want it to creep up and then no one knows how to deal with it. But one of my key phrases is, we are lucky because we know I've got this diagnosis, and I do see it as lucky because I see it as very much as our eyes are completely wide open. I 100% enjoy everything that I can enjoy. And the one conversation I do have with my children is, we make the best of what we've got. So we try and go on holiday whenever I can squeeze a holiday in, or do something nice, or go out to the cinema together, or have a family games night. And I say, that is what is important. Being aware, like, who knows what tomorrow's going to bring any of us.
It's true.
But the here and now, we'll just enjoy it. and I'll squeeze in as many of those life experiences in as much as I possibly can until a time comes where I can't. So
you
that's how
said
I see
something
it.
to me in a message once, and I can't remember your exact words, but it was something like I didn't choose it, but I can't remember how you finished that sentence. Do you remember what you said? I can't remember. It was like, I didn't choose this life, but I'm living it, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I do. That's how I see it. I mean, and this is the thing. And my mum always says to me, I always remember you, Kate, coming home and saying, "This is my journey." I do believe that, you know, I didn't choose this. I never would have chose this, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
You, I was obviously always going to walk down this path, and so and I guess that is how I look at things, Steph. I do look at this. I don't wallow. I'm not worried. I'm not worried at all about me and what the future holds for me. I think my biggest fears of what I've said to you before is I worry about my family and how I don't want them to live in grief when I'm not here anymore. That's my biggest fear. And I'm working on trying to overcome that. So I didn't choose this, but whatever is going to be, it's going to be. So I can't change it. All I can do is look after myself and do the best that I can do and and when I say have the best, I'm not materialistic. I mean, we've got a lovely home, but over the last 2 years, it's been on the market, on and off the market, because I want to sell it. I want to downsize. I want us to have a smaller home, less bills, and I want us to be able to go, be, and enjoy. And that's that's what it's about as far as I'm concerned.
I 100% agree with you on that. Me and my husband had this conversation not that long ago, and it was off the back of just somebody had passed away that we knew, and we were talking about the belongings that that person had that were now sitting somewhere not being dealt with, and that's kind of what was left of that person. And we kind of both sat there and said, you know what people are left with of that person are photos and memories, and that's what counts. And it is, I mean, photos of things that they're doing together and trips they're taking together, and what's left in your memory bank of that person, their clothes and all of that just eventually become either somebody else's, or they go off somewhere, they, or whatever. But what we're left with is that memory of that person and the images we have of that person. And we both got that in that moment said, that's what we want to create. That's what we want to leave behind us, are moments that our family can remember and go, oh my God, do you remember when we did this with mum? Do you remember we did this with Grange? Do you remember? And that is what we want to leave as our legacy, not things. Things don't really matter. They just don't matter. Yeah, sure, you want to leave financial security if you can for your family, but it's the memories that I hold the dearest to me, and the photos that I hold on that mean more to me than anything anybody could ever have left me that was like a material object. It really is so important. So
and I think I totally agree with you, Steph. And I think the thing is, in the world that we live in, it is a very materialistic world, isn't it? Which is really, really, really a shame. And I sort of felt like during lockdown and COVID that sort of lifted a little bit, but I do feel like it's almost sort of slipped back into that, back into the running on the wheel. I mean, it certainly hasn't for me, because obviously I have this diagnosis, but I think for a lot of people that has happened. And I'm absolutely with you. It's, yes, I might not be here for the next 50 years, but I'm for sure squeezing all of those things that I would have done over the next 50 years into whatever I have got.
No, exactly. And none of us can say without a diagnosis that we're going to be here for that long. None of us. No. And for some, it will take having a diagnosis to kind of bring them to that kind of realization. And for others, they live in that moment, they live in the present. And because none of us have that guarantee of what's going to happen tomorrow at all. And COVID is a great example of that we all kind of was like, oh my goodness, we're going to spend more time doing this because we were forced to. But once the world started opening up again, we lost that perspective and we went and resumed our lives. And that's okay. That's okay. But do you ever have dark moments?
Not really. Not like I did before. Not in between primary and secondary, which was what, 3 years? Was it 4 years? I had more dark moments then than I have since I've had my secondary diagnosis. I do occasionally, but not anything like before. I think I was living very much in that what if it happened? What if it happens? Whereas now it's happened. So it's weird. This is what happened to me. When I got my primary diagnosis, I'm a massive Pink fan. And she released the album Beautiful Trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally 100% believed that my initial diagnosis was a beautiful trauma. And I really struggled to say it out loud because I thought people would think I'm really odd by saying that something quite scary has turned into something quite beautiful, which it did. And then when I got my secondary diagnosis, she released Trustful. And again, it was so relevant. I don't know if you've ever listened to the words of Trustful, but it's basically,
but I'm going to now.
Yeah, it's basically about trusting enough to fall and someone would catch you.
Mm-hmm.
And the words are just so... the start of the song is amazing. And I remember and like I say, me and my sister go to every Pink concert we get
I haven't been, and it's on my bucket list because I'm such a fan of Pink, and it's on my bucket list. I said to my husband, next time we are going.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's an incredible artist. And just also a bit of a hero, if I'm honest, like the way she brings up her children and her lifestyle, she is rebellious and she stands up for what she believes in. And me and my sister are real fans. We always say that we're the best friends that she doesn't know she's got. Poor Pink.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll never meet us. And I think those songs really just say all about my diagnosis. And I really believe that my life is actually, secondary, it's a tough one to swallow, definitely, but it is also brings about such amazing things, like wonderful people. You realise how loved you are, how important you are to other people, how important other people are to you. And it's definitely made my life a lot richer. And that's not financially, because it definitely hasn't made me richer financially. But yeah, in the way that I feel, and actually on my secondary diagnosis, all of my local friends, because I was diagnosed, I only found out and I started my chemotherapy on the 1st of December. And I think like a week or 2 weeks after, they surprised me. All of my girlfriends that lived locally to me came and did a carol singing in my back garden.
Oh my goodness.
And it was the most, I can't tell you, it was the most uplifting, loving, thoughtful, kind gesture that anyone has ever done for me. It was amazing.
Sounds incredible. Yeah. I love the words you use as a beautiful trauma. I use similar words when I reflect on my experiences of collateral beauty. So those are the words that I use. And I believe my whole lifetime is a whole series of collateral beauty. Even the darkest, most traumatic times have created this beauty in my life that I just see the world very differently because of that.
Yeah.
And I think I truly believe we get to choose. We get to choose how we look at the world, how it frames us, how it defines us. And the choices we can make around that is, are we going to allow it to define us in a way where we barely survive day to day? just on that hamster wheel, just getting by, resentful, angry, frustrated, or we look in the other direction and we go, no, I'm not going to allow this. I'm going to allow this to define me in a beautiful way, to teach me, to help me to grow, to show me different lessons, to show the people that I've got in my life, all of those things. That's an opportunity we have. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I know I've said it to some people when I've been working with them one-to-one, and they kind of look at me like I've got two heads, like how on earth could I ever take this experience and think of and show gratitude to him? I said, maybe not this moment in time, but maybe you can sometime very soon. And some people don't ever come back. Other time they want to go, actually, no, I really want to get to see this. I really want to experience this. And we keep going, but not everybody's ready, of course.
And it's hope, isn't it? Like, hope is one of the most important things that you can have. And if you don't turn, like, I could have sat and wasted my life, and I probably wouldn't be here. It probably shorten my life if I sat and dwelled. And I've never done the poor me. I've never said why me, because nobody knows. So that was just what was on my life path. That was, it was obviously for a reason. There's obviously something. I'm hoping that I show other people strength and hope, and that cancer doesn't have to look like what it used to look like a long time ago. And that will give hope to other people. That's sort of what I visualize as being part of my journey, and I'm not wasting one moment of that by sitting and dwelling, because that would be wasting the time that I could be smiling and enjoying myself.
100% agree. Absolutely. Honestly, I can't agree. I'm nodding away profusely at you here. What are your absolute non-negotiables now in life? What is something you will not compromise on?
There will always be a holiday. And that will be, I don't know how I do it. I always just say, I will find it. I will find the money. Because for me, I came from a travel agent industry, so I've always loved a holiday, which is unfortunate because they tend to be more expensive than a pair of shoes. But for me, that's the time when us as a family leave home and we spend time somewhere, just us four all together, enjoying each other's company, having fun, really just so it's not negotiable. There has to be at least a holiday a year, and often more than one if I'm lucky.
What's your favorite destination so far?
We were really lucky and went to the Maldives last year, and it was heaven on earth. But I've got a lot of favorite places, a lot. What I need to do though is start moving around the UK, because I think where I was a travel agent, I went abroad a lot because I could, and so I love traveling. But I also know that we have a lot of beautiful places here, and I've just not really travelled around the UK. So
you should go and travel around the islands of Scotland.
Oh, really?
Absolutely stunning. And if you get the weather, which is a little bit hit and miss, but it is like being in a Caribbean island. The water's clear, they have palm trees, you can see the seals. It's just, some of my most favourite memories are from some of the islands in Scotland. Absolutely beautiful.
I will, because this is one of the things. As a family, we went. So I finished my chemotherapy in the March, and in the August, as a whole family, my mum and dad, my sister, and my family all went off to Lake Garda, because we love Italy, and I love the lakes. There's just something lovely about the lakes. But we've got a lake. I live in Gosfield, and there's a lake in Gosfield, and I rarely go down there, but when I've gone down there, it is the most beautiful place. And I think I can walk there, but I spend money and get on an airplane to go. It's crazy. But yeah, so I think that is one of my goals, to start trying to spend more time seeing the natural beauty in the UK, hopefully in a camper van with my dog. That would be lovely. But yeah. We'll see.
One question I ask everybody that I interview is, if you could go back and speak to a younger version of yourself, what age would you go back to and what would you say to her?
Probably the 7-year-old me, because at around that age, I was at school with several children that lost parents to cancer. And it's something that's always sort of been a bit of a fear of mine throughout my whole life. And I think I would go back to little me and I would say, it changes. It doesn't, don't worry about cancer, because in the future, it will become a manageable disease.
Yeah.
It's already becoming a manageable disease.
Yeah.
It's just, they've not, it's still work in progress. But it's coming. It's coming. So don't spend all of your life worrying about it, because medicine changes, everything changes, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And a similar conversation me and my husband had the other day about, they saying, oh, you know, more people are affected. 1 in 2 now are diagnosed. And he's like, but they're not balancing that statistic out with the survival rates and why that's happening. And because it's becoming so much more curable and we've got more awareness around it and people are picking it up a lot sooner. And it's not something that is such a terrible or a definitive diagnosis that it used to be. It still has, the word cancer still has a lot of fear for me. And because my sister didn't see it, you know, she didn't survive it. And when my son was diagnosed this year, it knocked me off my feet as well, because it was just, oh my God, it's the C word. I'm terrified. But, you know, working through all of that, and he's cured now and it's all really great. But that's the thing, that fear that we've all had from young childhood, because when we learned about it so many years ago, it was a very serious thing and it did mean end of life.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely been something that I have lived with my whole life as well. So yeah, it's definitely changing. I mean, fortunately for me, I did a trek in between my primary diagnosis and my secondary. I did a Copperfield trek, which
I've
is
heard about this trek. Your sisters told me about this trek.
I mean, we both had totally different experiences on it, but now it is the most incredible thing that you could do. That what you learn about yourself, what you push yourself out of every comfort zone. And I think everyone should do a Copperfield trek, if I'm honest. But what I learned from that was the founder, who is a lady called Chris Halenga. She has been living with it, I think now 14 years. And she was 23, I think, when she was diagnosed. That gave me hope.
Yeah.
Because when you hear about people living with a secondary diagnosis for that length of time, it starts to chip away at the fear of cancer. And in fact, even a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to another lady, 16 years. So, you know, like my husband said to me, yes, Kate, they say there isn't a cure, but you know, if people are living in no evidence of disease for longer and longer, what, you know, isn't that a cure in an element to a degree? So I think that knowing that allowed me to deal with my secondary diagnosis.
Yeah, I think hope is everything. Everything. And when we lose hope, then that's when we can spiral and go into that well and not find that ladder to get ourselves back out again, because it just gets very dark. And hope is the thing that keeps me going every day. And it's not that I have a terrible life to have to look for hope in, but hope that better, great things are coming and we're going to have fantastic adventures and all of that. That's what I mean by hope. And I just think it's lacking. It's lacking in community. It's lacking in individuals now, that it's being diminished all the time. So yeah, I think that sounds like you had quite a transformational experience on that trek.
Yes, definitely. And this is the thing, isn't it? Hope. I think that should be something that we should be seeing more of it on the telly, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Because if not that I watch a lot of telly, but I think for people that do watch a lot of telly, there's so much doom and gloom. If there was more hope on the telly, I think the world would be a different place,
wouldn't it just? It saddens me that something like a good news channel wouldn't survive because it's not dire enough and people wouldn't watch it. You're just like, whoa. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. But there we go. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I've loved this conversation. We share a lot of the same values and a lot of the same way of looking at the world. So it's been really, really wonderful. If anybody was listening to this now and wanted to reach out to you, are you open to that?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I've got an Instagram page and Facebook page. But you can take my contact details. That's absolutely fine.
I'll pop in the show notes links to your socials. So anybody listening that wants to follow your story or is having a similar experiences to you and would like to reach out to you, then they can do that way. So wonderful. Yep. Thank you so much again. It's been just really, really wonderful talking to you today.
Oh, you're welcome, Steph. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.